All right. There's certain laws that have facilitated and opened the door for religious workers to enter into the secular force, secular uh, secular settings. The first one is the very oldest one is the First Amendment to the Constitution. I'm going to lower this so I can read it out loud. The First Amendment to the Constitution provides the following protection. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then it goes on to talk about abridging the freedom of speech, of the press, the right of the people to assemble peaceably, and to petition the government for grievances. So that is our very oldest law that deals with chaplaincy. The Constitution provides that the states and the federal government cannot make a law that would establish a religion or prohibit the free speech or exercise thereof. Okay, so they can't make a law to promote a religion or to stop us from exercising our religion. And at that time, if you remember, it was very common for governments to have a state religion. In England, it was the Anglican Church, and some of the colonies actually had provisions in their charters that you had to be part of such and such a church to hold public office. But that is not provided for in the Constitution, and that's why they included that, because while many of our founding fathers and the original colonists participated in either Catholicism or a Protestant religion,
Christianity.
They felt that you couldn't make that a requirement because it discriminated against other types of religions, like the Jewish people that had come to our country. So there are other types of forms of worship, and this provides for the ability to worship according to our conscience. One court summarized the protection of the First Amendment in this way. The amendment protects freedom of religious speech and the expression of view. It protects the free exercise of religion, and it ensures freedom of religious worship by prohibiting the government from establishing a state religion. Okay. In Lemon versus Kurtzman in 1971, the Supreme Court, I will get into what Lemon versus Kurtzman was very briefly, and in a few minutes, established a three-pronged test to determine whether a statute or government policy offended the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. The court said in 1971, the statute must have a secular purpose, a secular action as its primary or principal effect. It must neither advance nor inhibit religion, and it would not promote excessive government entanglement in religion. So before we go into the details about those the three prongs of the Lemon test, there was a state statute in Pennsylvania providing for government funds to non-secular schools. And Lemon brought a suit against the state official, Kurtzman, saying that it violated the Establishment Clause. And of course, all these court hearings take time, and it proceeded up the ladder until it got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court held that this particular statute violated the three prongs test. Specifically, it encouraged excessive government involvement in religion. Okay, so any comments about that before, or questions before we go in and talk about the three prongs of the lemon test? No questions? All right, then I'm going to lower this down a little bit. All right, so we're going to go on. The first prong talks about a secular purpose. Okay, there is not a problem with having a religious element to a program, but this, in this ruling, in their comments that they make, the Supreme Court explained that there can be no animus of religion, or it cannot be the goal of the program in order to be acceptable with public funds or in public policy. Okay, so animus of religion means that it is promoting it. Okay, religious tests for public employment became unconstitutional. There were religious tests for people to hold government office in the early colonial days, in the early days of the states. But the court made it clear that the presence of a religious purpose in the practice or law or policy does not mean it is prohibited. So that allows for a double stream. It can have a helpful effect, like providing support, but it can also have a religious element. Okay. The primary effect test. The second prong of the lemon test states that the principal or primary effect of the program is not one that could advance the practice of religion or inhibit its practice. Because a program has a primary effect to promote some legitimate secular end, the program could also be discovered or be examined to see. It could also have an element that would directly promote a particular religion or doctrine or church. And we'll see that in one of the cases we're going to go into. Any questions or comments to this point?
Yeah, Trish, I have one, because I'm a little perplexed then, because prayer was taken out of school. And then they went even so far as to say, like at different events, football games, before any kind of event, that there couldn't be prayer. But prayer wasn't in and of itself, it really wasn't promoting a particular it wasn't promoting the religion. It was just, asking God or just giving a generalized prayer. So did something come after this?
Well, I haven't looked into the particular court cases that activated that, how it actually came to think that it violated the lemon test. We can feel that it's prohibiting the exercise of religion too. So I can look into that. I don't have the particular rulings or opinions that cause that to come out. I think as we talk about some of these things, sometimes government entities or agencies try to avoid litigation and problems, because as we've noticed increasingly over the last, during our lifetime, right, since I was a child, we can see that there's targeting of Christian practices and freedoms in all levels. Now, did determined that that was trying to force someone to pray that was an atheist. Perhaps at the end of the class, I'm gonna mention court case in the Fifth Circuit Court with a Texas judge that kind of defines that, right? Because we find that the Supreme Court did reaffirm the tradition of opening legislative sessions in state and federal government with prayer, right? And that was a long time, since the 1770s, right? A practice. So I think they allow certain things because it was a tradition, and but as we see progressively, we are going to find attacks and shutting down of these privileges that we've experienced. So, yeah, I don't have an answer of what the particular findings were that shut down prayer in public education and even bringing Bibles in Bible clubs.
Okay, I remember, now it's coming back to me about the prayer in school. There was a woman, supposedly, but really it was the government that was doing it also. That's why prayer was taken out. I don't have the exact, but I remember now. Okay, and I guess it came after 1971.
Right, so this is when the Kurtzman versus Lemon was decided in the Supreme Court. So because of that, you know, people are using these opinions and court cases to restrict religious involvement. And we understand as Christians that it's the rebellion of man's heart that doesn't want God to tell us what to do. I mean, that's ultimately what the problem is, and it's, you know, not going to get any better. Okay. The third prong is excessive government entanglement. It's how much oversight is necessary to ensure that it is not violating the first two prongs, and what material is being included, if you know, to meddle with the particular religious doctrine. We have different denominations that have different beliefs. Of course, if we go back to it's all basically according to the Nicene or the Apostles' Creed, but it's not to have detailed monitoring or close administration or oversight. And if a program needs that or it implements that or uses these tests and investigations and administration, it violates the excessive entanglement test. And even oversight by the chaplains can be determined to risk undue entanglement. So the three prongs again are a secular purpose. Its primary effect must neither advance or prohibit a religion, and it should not foster an excessive government entanglement with religion. Okay, the chaplaincy, there were certain laws, certain decisions, and court cases that validated chaplaincy and gave it a grounding to be involved in government. And we will find that if we look into the details of these decisions and the opinions that the justices or judges write in regards to these questions, they're not concrete black and white victories or defeats. Okay, there was I'm going to go into these briefly. Carter versus Broadlands Medical Center. You can look them up. Boswinkle versus the City of Charlotte. And Lynch versus Donnelly. Which one do I want? That's more important. Okay, I'm going to do Boswinkle versus the City of Charlotte first, because this covered the establishment of religion. What happened in the City of Charlotte, and this was decided in the U.S. District Court in 1980, there was the city of Charlotte implemented a police chaplaincy program that was monitored and administrated, and chaplains chosen through a local Baptist church. So, of course, Boswinkle didn't like this. They used an individual and said that it was promoting a religion, because the police chaplaincy had a particular agreement with this Baptist church. The dissension or the objection first went to the city council, and the city determined that there was a secular purpose and a predominantly secular effect. However, the applications for chaplaincy went through the church. In the district court ruling in 1980, it was held that the agreement violated the establishment clause because it gave preference to that particular church or religion, favoring or advancing a particular religious denomination or religious entity. But the positive thing is, okay, they did allow the program, but they wanted the applications to be open publicly to anybody and not just whoever the Baptist church chose. But it did set a precedent, and precedent is very important in court cases. It set a precedent for guidelines, and the positive effect was it validated the government using a religious worker to benefit their employees. So that was the positive effect, and it was found to be in violation of the establishment clause, but it was actually, so it wasn't, like I said, all positive or all negative, because they had to redo things, and they did find that that particular chaplaincy program needed to be changed, but it did give a validity for a religious entity being involved in the police department. And we all know that people need support, especially the responders, and there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of support and help that these agents need. Okay. Now I want to go over, I'm kind of going backwards on here. I want to go over Lynch versus Donnelly, because we can see it was in 1984 in the U.S. Supreme Court, and this affects why cities no longer have nativities on public ground. Why public ground does not have religious symbols in their displays during holidays. Okay, before I go on, is there any questions about the police chaplaincy in the city of Charlotte? Nothing? Look at, make sure I got it. Okay. All right. So in Lynch versus Donnelly, what happened was they were challenging the legality of Christmas decor in display on government property, and as a challenge to the establishment clause by having a nativity or a cross, or in this particular case it was Christmas, so it was a nativity and baby Jesus and all. and that kind of thing. However, the result of this court case was the Supreme Court decided that it was all right to have a religious display because it was associated with holiday decorations and it was included with other holiday symbolism at the time. So it was determined to be a secular purpose, right? Holiday displays. What kind of holiday displays are customarily accepted at Christmas time? We'll use, because this was Christmas, what kind of Christmas decorations do you see up?
Are you asking?
I'm not sure who's talking, but go ahead.
It's Madeline. Are you asking a question about what type of holiday displays we see?
What type of holiday displays? Well,
no, I'm asking you, what is your question?
Oh, my question is, what type of displays are people accustomed to seeing at Christmas time? What kind of symbolism or things do they associate with that holiday season?
Unfortunately, now what I see, it's the Santa Claus, it's the Dr. Seuss character. I've even seen the black garland around people's homes, black lights, but a very few Christians, the nativity scenes, and that's what my question is. This was in 1984, and I remember, though, that all the stores and everything. All the stores.
Hold on, Bridget. Go ahead, Madeline.
All the stores.
I'm sorry, I don't have it on here. I'm sorry.
Playing the Christmas music that had, any type of, like Christianity based. They stopped playing that music. The city halls and the public places, they did take away the nativity scenes. I just started seeing them come back. What was it, last year or was it this year when I actually saw a nativity scene at it was, I can't remember where I was, in some suburb, and it was at a city hall, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know they could do that. But everything disappeared when back in 1984, after that, whatever you call it, verdict or whatever. So I'm a little confused because they all took it away. As a matter of fact, they even took away in stores the employees being able to say Merry Christmas. They have to say Happy Holidays. Unless you say Merry Christmas to them first, and then they can respond Merry Christmas. Otherwise, they have to say Happy Holiday. So I'm a little confused about that.
Well, that's exactly why we're going over this and discussing this, and I'll keep your thoughts in mind because that's going to be included in our discussion. And at the end, a particular court case that I followed in the 5th District Court, we'll talk about that. Bridget, you had something you wanted to say also in regards to this?
I am so sorry when Madeline was talking. My cat jumped on my coffee, and I took the mute off too fast, so I apologize. I wasn't being rude.
Okay, I just see your hand is still up, so I thought you had something to say.
I did have something to say about that too. I just want to apologize about that.
Okay, go ahead.
What Madeline was saying about how so many people is taking Christ out of Christmas, and they're turning it around for their own celebrations. She said the black lights, and I was riding down Gratiot one day, and I saw a big old, a 6-foot Skeletor, and he was holding he was holding the cross, and then it said Merry Christmas. I said, what the world do this big 10-foot skeleton got to do with Christ? It just threw you all the way off because he was looking scary. He had the blood dripping, and of course, that had nothing to do with Christ. And I remember I was working at home for Alzheimer's around Christmas time. And someone said, how you doing today? And I would always say, I'm blessed. And somebody went back and said that they didn't appreciate me saying that, which sounded crazy. So my supervisor called me into the office and she said, well, just don't say blessed anymore. Just say you're doing fine. And I just couldn't believe that. I thought, oh my God. So what Madeline was saying about you can't say Merry Christmas on the job and stuff like that, so it's really ironic how they had, they're taking God out of the schools and the workplace and, taking Christ out of Christmas. It's just over the top. So it's just unbelievable, how everybody is, taking it out and don't want to acknowledge it, just in the spiritual atmosphere. You know what I'm saying?
Right. As we find that society is increasingly secular, and as the atheists are promoting their beliefs and their rights and not wanting to be infringed upon, we find that these things are people don't want to cause any problems or get any flack, and so they're increasingly, clamping down and changing on this. In Lynch versus Donnelly, however, it was ruled that the decorations, the nativity Christian decoration on display on government property was acceptable because it also had in the display other holiday emblems that people associated with that time of year. For example, it might have had a candy cane if you have it together with a menorah, or I'm not familiar with whatever symbols are available or prominent in Kwanzaa. It's okay. It's not that it wasn't promoting specifically Christianity. It might have had a snowman or bells or candy canes or Santa Claus, that it was acceptable. But one of the things is people don't want government entities and schools, they don't want the hassle and the cost of people bringing complaints. In my little town, they have had a number of people suing the city because of their marijuana whatever they called it, that they passed, that you could have certain amount of recreational marijuana facilities, and other people that wanted these entities to make money were suing the city, and they had to settle, and there was a thing that they had to allow certain processes because of the court decisions, and it's costly and it's a hassle. So people are avoiding it. In the city of East Point, they have carolers on their city hall, right? That's a Christmas decoration. But we're in this particular ruling in Lynch versus Donnelly, it did have a negative effect because it brought attention to religious displays at holiday times. So at Easter or Thanksgiving, or if you want to call it Easter Resurrection Day, some people differentiate strongly with that it's offensive to some people, and so they want to restrict the use of religious symbols. And other groups, such as atheist activist groups, are actively trying to target Christian expressions in our society. So like your Bridget's supervisor, we don't want the hassle of dealing with it, so let's just go along. Okay, but we do have freedom of speech, right? So we can push back if we wanted to be we can push back in a respectful way, not antagonistic way, about our freedoms of speech. And we can push back by insisting that certain things are allowed, but they don't want the cost and they don't want the hassle. All right, someone's got some. Etta says she's in Lincoln Park. In my city for the last 2 years, I have seen nativity back on property. However, some one of these other displays have underlying religious messages or tones. Okay. Tolan, you raised your hand? Yeah? Go ahead.
Unmute. So when you was asking this question about the chaplaincy of validated, so were you getting at when it came to these court rulings, when it came to chaplaincy, is we supposed to be aware that everybody doesn't believe in the same thing, and so understanding your audience and how you service them, is that the theme of it?
Well, that is a sub reason, but it's to show you about how these 3 prongs of the lemon test came to be and how they were validated in these different decisions, even if it had a certain negative effect on religious expressions or the chaplaincy program. So it's twofold. Yes, we do need to be aware, because there are people that will target you. You could be singled out. But we also have our rights, and this is just showing why the government accepts chaplaincy, religious workers in their agencies, in their environment, on their grounds, on public property.
Because I'm aware that we can come across offensive to somebody else nationality or religion preference if we're not aware as chaplains of how someone else practice serving God. Because I remember I experienced this with a pen pal that I had in the Netherlands, and I had sent her a Christmas card, and she was kind enough to let me know that they didn't celebrate Christmas, or even that part of that country didn't celebrate Christmas like we did over in the States. And they celebrated somebody, I don't know. But I was so unaware because I was so caught up in how we view things over here that I almost pushed it on another culture. And so I'm thinking as a chaplain, we have to be aware of who we servicing and how we come across to meet their needs. And so that's why I wanted to pose that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Europe and in Belgium, in the Netherlands is extremely tolerant in certain aspects and very liberal. So they, on December 6th, they separate a religious holiday, Christmas, from St. Nicholas Day, which is when a historical character would go and give treats to good children. Okay, which it was actually a blessing to me, because Christmas in Belgium was a religious holiday. In Belgium, all the legal holidays are related to Catholic feast days, like Christmas, Easter. They have the Ascension of, which we know it's not true, the Ascension of Mary, because it was a predominantly Catholic country. All of their all of their holidays were religious oriented, but it separated the celebration of the birth of Christ from giving gifts. Go ahead, Madeline.
Now, I just wanted to comment. It's like, from what I've seen, Christmas is celebrated all around the world. So he could have gotten that type of reply from a pen pal if the pen pal lived right here in the state of Michigan. Okay,
Right.
don't celebrate because China, anywhere that there's a Christian religion, Christmas is celebrated. And like we were talking about, how you can't say Merry Christmas in certain employment establishments, but everybody, it seems nowadays, celebrates Happy Holidays. You know, they celebrate Christmas. They don't celebrate Christmas with the knowledge and understanding that Christians do, but even Jews are celebrating Christmas. At my employment, hey, they celebrate Christmas. You know, they do Hanukkah, but they don't do Hanukkah with the employees, but they do Christmas with the employees, the owners of the company. They're all Jews and devout Jews, but they do celebrate because they know the vast majority of their employees are you know, celebrating Christmas. So whether it's Happy Holidays or whatever, Merry whatever, Christmas is known all around the world. So he could have gotten that type of reply, like I said, even if she was right here.
Right, right. But they do distinguish, and some people don't celebrate because they're not religious in Europe. They wouldn't celebrate Christmas because it's religious, and they're not religious people. Okay. All right, we're getting some good discussion here on this. Okay, the last court case that I want to talk, well, and it's not the last court case, the last one dealing with the Lemon test is Carter versus Broadlands Medical Center, and that was in the 8th U.S. Court of Appeals. It didn't go up to the Supreme Court in 1988. And Carter was an individual that was, they always use an individual to bring a lawsuit, but they were backed by the Iowa Interfaith Agency for Peace and Justice, which was an atheist group, of course. And it was a very complicated case. There was a lot of opinions and direction involved in this chaplain program at Broadlands Medical Center. And it did a lot, the decision did a lot to restrict the program, because the chaplain would meet with employees, but it was held that employing the chaplain would be unconstitutional, an unconstitutional establishment of religion in this case, except that a chaplaincy in the hospital was justified under the free exercise clause. So they used a parallel with having a chaplain to service military or servicemen when they were deployed and unable to practice their religion, and having a Catholic or Protestant chaplain or a Jewish chaplain to provide for the exercise of their religion. They, aside from restricting the program and that this chaplain could no longer approach employees and needed to limit themselves to enabling patients who were not able to get out and practice their religion to have religious exercise. It decided that because the hospital people were not able to go to their church services, that it was not unconstitutional, and it was helping them under the First Amendment for the free exercise of their religious expression. It permitted employment by the hospital of a religious worker with restrictions, however, consistent with the free exercise rationale. So that chaplain program, they could no longer freely reach out to everybody, but if the employees would come to them on a private basis, that would be different. So basically, it was a very complicated case, but it did allow and encourage chaplaincy in a medical center that was received government funds. Is your hand up again, Madeline, or is that old?
That's old.
Okay. Is there any kind of comments or questions about this case? So like I was saying, there were positive things in this case, but it did whittle down on the chaplaincy program because they didn't want extreme entanglement of discovering if you were trying to propagate religion, if you were reaching out inappropriately. So it validated a chaplain's program, but it provided stricter guidelines for not just walking around and witnessing, for example. Okay, we do know that medically and psychologically speaking, there is great evidence for spiritual support in a patient's healing, which was also discovered or noticed or cited in this case. All right, why are we not moving over? Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay. Any ideas or thoughts before we continue?
Yeah, my hand is up,
Oh,
Trish.
is it up again? I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was new. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question or thought process is going that my understanding of chaplaincy is that for the most part, we're listeners. We're supposed to be really, really in tuned and great listeners. And we're never to promote. We're not to be evangelists. We're not supposed to be telling them about being saved or coming to Christ or anything like that. But yes, we can definitely pray for them. So were the people getting offended because the prayer was, in Jesus Christ, in Jesus Christ's name or whatever like that? Because as a chaplain, I can't promote Christianity. As a matter of fact, that was one of the drawbacks that kind of made me want to do I really want to be a chaplain? Because I was taught that we cannot promote our religion whatsoever. We are not evangelists, but we can pray for them, and we are to be great listeners. And all the information that Bridget gave when she was talking about the young couple, we're to be able to give them resources. Loads and loads of resources and everything like that. So what was the real, in other words, to me, it shouldn't matter if you're a Jewish chaplain, Protestant chaplain, Baptist chaplain, as long as you're not because the devil worshippers, they've been allowed to call themselves a religion too, and be, like in the military and stuff like that. So I guess they have chaplains too. I don't know. But as long as, it's not something of that, to me, extreme, then it shouldn't matter what denomination chaplain you are, because in essence, we all are supposed to be operating in the same vein, so to speak.
Yeah, so I mean that is what I find increasingly in accredited chaplains associations, like the accrediting board. They're increasingly tolerant and ecumenical and less specific to Christian doctrine or individual religious beliefs, in the fact that we cannot promote. Well, it also depends on who you're with, right? In certain situations, we are not. It's not wise, because in this particular case, in all these cases, the people that are backing these three cases, and Lynch versus Donnelly, the American Civil Liberties Union in Voswinkle, the Society of Separationists, aka the American Atheists, in Broadlands Medical Center. It was where's the paper? This Iowa Interfaith Agency for Peace and Justice, which was an atheist organization. So they're trying to push their agenda, which is actually a faith, and it is in violation of the establishment of a faith, right? So that's where we have to be careful, is if we're trying the onus of religion, that we're animus of religion, that we're promoting religion and Christianity. But so we're not outright witnessing to people that we are not real familiar with. Like if you are in a chaplain for a company or a school or another educational facility or a medical facility, or, there are different religions that go into nursing homes and talk about spiritual things. So there is a fine line on what we can do and who we can or should do it with. So what I'm saying, and what this whole course is, this whole section is watching your back and knowing who you're dealing with, because these antagonistic philosophical groups are pushing their agenda through the legal system, through activism, and some of them, and we need to be careful. So when we're dealing with someone, you and I know that coming to Christ is the ultimate solution for all of our problems.
Yes.
And that's why we're trying to maintain our Christianity, our faith, in the midst of a rising tide of cultural tolerance and all kinds of philosophical beliefs. What we can do, we can point to scripture as, even with non-Christians, and we need to be careful, we can point to biblical principles that play out in our physical lives, right? We can talk about not being drunk with wine. There's certain things that we can point to in the Bible and our faith, but we have to be careful about it. And I'll share a case that of a military chaplain who had dealt with personal issue with wanting to commit suicide. And I talked about this in one of the courses because it was several years ago when we talked about the laws of Govern Chaplaincy, because it was a current issue. And he received a reprimand from his branch, from his supervisors, because he talked about using the Psalms and scripture and prayer to help him overcome and his depression and wrong thinking. Okay. And because he didn't have a certificate of training, some kind of official training in dealing with suicide. So we do have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, but we just have to be careful how we do it. Okay, as you mentioned, we're not evangelists. We come in the back door, right? A Christian counselor that is a licensed therapist, they also need to do the same thing. They can talk about different things when the people bring it up. If someone asks for the hope that lies within you, then you document that, and you can, as for your personal defense. For your personal defense. Okay. In the state of Michigan, we have a definition of, under the section Uniform Rules of Evidence, about whether a minister can be forced to testify against someone that discloses crime or activity to them in the atmosphere of a quote-unquote confessional. There is a description of what is a cleric. And this is how we can differentiate, how the state differentiates our state between a minister, priest, rabbi, Christian Science practitioner, or similar functionary of a religious organization, meaning a church body, or if they're really reasonably believed to be so. Okay, so this is defining what a cleric is. We are not defined as clerics because our credentials as a Christian worker in secular realm does not come from a religious body like a church or temple. So in our state, this is what determines some of the things that are which apply to chaplains versus a licensed or ordained minister. Okay. And it's important for us to understand the different rules in different states, because it's a state determined definition, right? Change. Okay. So if someone confides to a person in the capacity of being a Christian minister, a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, a Christian Science practitioner, or other functionary like are all an imam in the Muslim faith, or whatever other recognized religion there is, when someone confides in them, their communication is considered confidential if it's made privately and not intended for further disclosure. Okay, they call it the what do you call it? A confession. Okay, in a confessional. So the government, the state will not or is not legally able to pressure and require a priest or licensed minister to testify against that client because the person has a privilege. The cleric has a privilege to refuse to disclose this confidential communication because you were that person's spiritual advisor if you're in the capacity of a licensed minister. However, the chaplains are not considered. So I'm not going to go over C because that goes into descendants of people, and I'm just going to continue. Does anybody want to ask a question or clarify something about that?
Question, Trish. So some of us carry many titles. So in a discussion or, a meeting with someone, if they disclose something, you have to know what umbrella you were servicing that person at that particular time, because you have Pastor Anna. Pastor Anna, she's a pastor, but she's also a chaplain. So therefore, when the person comes to her and discloses something and and she feels, let's say, it needs to be taken to the law or whatever like that. As a pastor, she can't disclose it, but as a chaplain, she can disclose it. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
If they're coming to you as a spiritual advisor and recognizing, is somebody's hand up? I'm trying to see.
It's Pastor Anna. I'll speak after you finish. Go ahead.
Okay. Exact. That's that. And just so you people need to understand, if you are not a licensed or ordained minister or considered clergy or cleric, that if they tell you something, you can be subpoenaed to testify against them. Okay. There are certain mandated reporters. We're going to talk about that mandated reporting in a second here. And there are certain laws about in Michigan, and we'll also mention that as far as child abuse, that everybody is required to report that if they suspect. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
I just wanted to know, when Dr. Matlin was speaking before, when he was talking about the things you can say and you can't say. And my understanding is, if we're chaplains, I don't care what religion or race you are, everybody is under the impression that you're chaplains, and that's just like clergy. That's just like, they know that you're talking about God. You came to encourage them in one way or another. Is that not so? Is that what chaplaincy is all about when we go to people, when we minister to people, that they have an expectation?
I think they still do. As society is becoming increasingly secular, I think agencies and people are expecting more of a psychological response. But in general, when a person thinks of a chaplain, we've talked about this in the introduction to chaplaincy. When someone thinks of a chaplain, they're thinking of a religious representative. Usually the first chaplains we are familiar with were military chaplains, right? So,
Yes.
but we can't assume that anymore. So it's important to know under what umbrella, what the people's expectations of us are. We cannot any longer assume that they are expecting or want to receive the Christian perspective, a religious, spiritual answer. Although everything we say and do, the underlying force is the gospel, is the Bible, right? And there's a lot of principles in the Bible that we can very freely talk about, versus coming right out and saying you need to do this because the Bible says this.
Oh, that's understandable. That's good. I was just wanted some clarity in that area and everything because a lot of people are confessing that they're Christians, but does not necessarily mean they're Christians. So, and like you said, that we need to know the people that we're around and how far we can go, you know, and what their understanding is of us being the chaplain, being there for them.
Right. You can see in a lot of seminaries, there are people that become ministers because it's a profession. And there are people that have some type of religious background, or they want to, because of an experience they have, want to be a chaplain in a hospital because of an end of life situation, that really have no faith. And then there are those that have a different faith than we have. And we'll talk about some of that, I think, when we're talking about in a future lesson on cultural diversity and tolerance. Okay, so there are laws in Michigan about mandated reporting. Okay, it's been revised from 1961, but ministers or Christian Science practitioners are not required to disclose a confession. Okay, but there are different professions, so they can't, so this is talking about the ministers of the gospel. They cannot be forced to disclose, like you see a deathbed confession in a movie, right, of a mafia figure talking to his priest or something, and he survives, but the priest can't be testifying against this mafia figure because he came to them in the form of a confession. However, there are certain, I'm going to go back, mandated reporters. I want to go into that phrase, that designation. There are jobs where, and positions where that employee or that person is a mandated reporter, which means they are obligated to report different types of abuse. It's particularly aimed at children, but also if there's domestic violence. But there's things like child care workers, teachers, nurses, some type of therapists are required to report suspected abuse. And they're not supposed to be punished if they are wrong, because if you don't do it, you can be prosecuted, right? When you have a child care license, you are a mandated reporter, and you are required to report if a child has strange bruising or malnourished, or we have incidences we hear about kids being locked in rooms. That's so this is details about the child protection law from 1975. Any legally recognized privileged communication except that between attorney and client, because there is an attorney and client privilege, or that made to a member of clergy in his professional character in a confession, that requirement let me just read it what it says. Or similarly confidential communication is abrogated and shall not constitute grounds for excusing a report otherwise required to be made for excluding evidence of a civil child protective proceeding. So this is relating to child abuse and child neglect, that if a member of clergy receives this information, they must respond. So they're not excluded by the privileged communications consideration. Okay, and that's generally under the under the age of 12. And it's kind of difficult these days because now they're sexualizing children. So all these things are happening and acceptable. Okay, so this is kind of our disclaimer that we need to be careful. When I say you need to know exactly your state's laws, obviously state laws are so complicated, we need interpretation to know what they mean. For example, some people say that a chaplain can perform a marriage ceremony in our state. However, it's not a legal marriage ceremony, wedding ceremony, because you are not a cleric, and you are of a religious organization, and you cannot technically sign a marriage license. Okay, so there is copies of the laws. When I'm saying we need to be wise and understand our situation, if you're not ordained or licensed, this is again the chaplaincy program's disclaimer. If you're not a licensed or ordained minister or an imam or a rabbi, you're probably not covered by the privileged communication law and could be required to testify. You can still function as a chaplain, but people must understand that what they tell you is not under the seal of the confessional. It's not excluded from having to report. So as a mandated reporter, you need to understand if you are required at every instance to report. And there are certain things that as human beings, the law ethically indicates that we should report. Any comments at this point?
Yeah, I have a comment. So in other words, we have to, just like the police, when they arrest someone and they say, whatever you say may be held against you. So when we when we speak to someone, we need to say, oh, okay, well, whatever you held may be held against, whatever you say may be held against you, because hey, we are licensed, but I am not a clergic. So whatever you say, if it's something that's against the law or whatever, I must report it. I mean,
who's going to tell you anything if you say no? Must report is only in respect to child abuse. Now, if you're looking at someone that has thoughts and had thoughts about killing somebody, and if they tell you they did kill somebody, are you morally and legally required to come forward? Is there a law that says that I have to report if I see you slashing somebody's tires? It's an ethical situation, right? There's different instances of people coming to you and talking about drug use. So it's not every situation you must go and call the police about it, or Department of Health and Human Services to the CPS. But when you talk about children, you definitely do. And there are certain professions where, as a mandated reporter, you can be prosecuted if you're not and lose your credentials.
May I ask this then?
Yes, ma'am.
For instance, like you said, reporting about child abuse or whatever. But what about people, because I know like when you work in a shelter and places like that, when people threaten to kill themselves, they want to commit suicide, as a chaplain, if somebody confessed that they wanted to commit suicide and they're thinking about it, are we supposed to report it?
Every time we've had different classes on suicide, and every time somebody says it, whether we think it's for attention or whether they actually have considered it, we need to take them seriously. Now, when we're looking at the likelihood, we look at, do they have a plan? Do they have the means at their disposal? And what is their emotional state? Is it something that they're about to do now? Okay. Unless you have training in some kind of certificate in dealing with that, you would be better off to refer them to somebody that is specialized in that respect. For example, if they have all these emergency hotlines, those people are trained in what to say and do. Who would you call if someone said, I'm thinking about taking my life?
You're right about that, because I just had a class on mental illness as an aid. So you should have materials, or you should know who to call, or find out who we could call if that person is having that problem.
And if it's an imminent thing, of course, we call 911, right?
Yes.
You know,
but they do have hotlines, like you said, for people that's thinking about committing suicide.
And when we did a class, I mean, if some of you remember, the percentage of people that have thought about it, the percentage of people that have tried, the percentage of people that have created a plan. I mean, all these circles intersect, and where that point of convergence is the most volatile. So we always have to take that seriously.
Yes, you're right. I remember the class. It was good. I did take that one.
So, yeah. Are you obligated to call every time somebody says, I'm going to kill myself? Sometimes we could say, I could just die. And there's other times when they say, I mean, we get despaired and we just don't want to continue living, but that doesn't mean we're going to end our lives. So that's a if it's something that's imminent, we need to get them to a place of safety, get them away from those means that they're talking about, get them into a public place, get them, sometimes they need to be taken to an emergency room and evaluated. But that's a different class, but you're not obligated legally, to act on that in such a manner every time somebody says something like that. Okay, so the last two things I want to talk about, we got a little bit of time here. This is a recent case, which is probably why some entities are more open to displaying Christian symbolism, like a nativity set on public property. Okay, in 2022, the city of Boston, well, it was prior to that, this case reached the Supreme Court. The city of Boston had a habit of displaying flags on their flagpoles along with the U.S. flag and their city flag. And they would display flags from whomsoever, but they refused to fly the Christian flag. So this case got all the way to the Supreme Court. It was heard in January of 2022, and they gave an opinion in May. So I don't know how they remember all these arguments so long. I can't keep it all together sometimes, what I read yesterday, right? But it was determined that Boston, the city of Boston, because they refused to fly the Christian flag when they flied the gay pride flag, and they flied this flag, and they flew this other flag, that they violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment when it rejected flying the Christian flag. And what was interesting, besides all that, is that it was a 9-0 ruling. Every justice on the Supreme Court agreed on this. So it kind of took the legs out from the effect of the Establishment Clause, and we will see, I think, as the years go on, we could see if someone is bold enough to act on it and suffer the consequences, we'll see some of the effects. What kind of effects are there? Well, that some places might put out a nativity set. Some people might be more open to hearing or seeing things about God, okay? Because of this recent and surprising ruling by the United States Supreme Court. Comments? What do you think about this, guys?
Well, not so surprising to me that they would have a unanimous decision, seeing who's on the Supreme Court now. But I do have a question going back to, you said that certain things had to be reported concerning children, but it was brought up about nursing homes. Okay, when someone is in a nursing home, then they are, you know how the adage says, once an adult, twice a child. Okay, so now they don't have maybe all of their faculties and able to do for themselves and all. If someone comes and says that, yeah, I've been molesting or raping, you know, one of my patients or clients in the nursing home, is there a requirement to report that?
I have not looked into that. There,
ethically, I understand. You know, ethically, of course we would. But
right.
I'm thinking about, is it lawfully? You know, in other words, in a court of law, would you be, would it be said that you had to report that? Why didn't you report that?
I think you could be fired if it came out that you didn't go to the management. Obviously, their job is to protect and care, and that's why we saw so much extreme restrictions in nursing homes during COVID, which were adversely physically and mentally adversely affecting the residents. I would have to look into it, and because I haven't heard I haven't studied it at all, but that is a good question. And or the same as with someone that's mentally handicapped, right? I don't know if you want to look into it in some kind of, there's elder law.
Nope.
And get back with us, that would be helpful.
No.
No? Okay. But I probably will, but maybe not immediately. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked into it to see if there is some type of legal requirement. Obviously, morally, we need to deal with that employee, that person in the nursing home needs to get out of there, because, you know, but the effects of this, I think we'll see that it also diminishes some of the considerations for Christian expression under free speech. However, as we're going to talk, I'm just going to mention very briefly a case of that also took place in 2022, that there was a judge named Wayne Mack, who was a justice of the peace, and he would open up his court sessions with prayer. And he was targeted and had several suits against him. And strangely enough, the last one was an atheist group from Wisconsin. A person representing them filed a suit because they said they felt undue pressure to, if they didn't pray, that would be prejudicial, and they didn't want to pray. However, on his court door, it said on the outside that you do not have to participate. You can wait out. You don't even have to be present. You can wait outside, and a bailiff or whoever will advise you when the actual court proceedings. And as I mentioned, he had a number of different suits, and eventually this one took, the last one took, and it went to the Fifth Circuit Court. And they found in favor of Judge Mack that, as the Supreme Court had already affirmed the practice of opening a legislative session with some type of prayer or devotion, and it was a long-standing practice going back to, colonial times. They ruled in favor that he was able to continue that. The problem is these groups, they lose and lose and lose, and they keep refining their arguments until they back someone into a corner. Like the baker in Colorado, we know so many times this person has been targeted and gone because of not wanting to participate in gay marriages, right? So I'm just mentioning this. It was determined that he could continue. It was a recent case, and he was targeted repeatedly. Comments?
I just wanted to say, I wanted to go back to what Dr. Mountain was talking about, as far as the laws for the seniors, their abuse and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you just look it up, it'll tell you the different laws and what you can do, about them being vulnerable. And there is, of course, punishment by imprisonment and everything, especially for the caregivers that's misusing. They have the Social Welfare Act that gives the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services responsibility to provide adult protective services. So they do have some information out there.
Okay.
I'm going to look into it further also, just to have it, to know what to do if as chaplains, as we run up against somebody elderly that's been abused.
Right, because we don't want to see anyone harmed, right? And we
Right.
don't want to be part of a continual assaults or damage. There's psychological abuse, and I think, verbal abuse, people don't recognize that so much, but it's a real thing. So we need to try to morally, and ethically, as Christians, help people be protected. And we don't do it just because the law says it. All right. Well, I thank everybody. Our homework for the chaplain students to read chapter 4 in Ethics 101. If do some reading in the faith. Etta, your books are on the way. I know you can get the trauma book on archive.org. Chapter 4 homework questions are in the manual, which you can find that in the PDF that I got you. Homework week 4, living a 24-karat gold life. So read chapter 4 in the ethics book, and there's 5 questions on how this shapes your thoughts on these. And that's all for today, unless somebody has some kind of needs or questions or comments.
Excuse me, may I ask you this? You said that my homework is on the way, or you said that the book was on the way. I missed what you said as far as that go.
Well, you should get it. I have in the next few days. I don't know how long it'll take for the trauma book to get to you.
Okay.
That one will take a little bit longer, but you do have access to all of those books if you keep trying to check them out from archive.org. I gave you the links. Okay, if you can't get to it, I mean, you can look at the questions and see how you would answer them just from your own experience without considering what John Maxwell says on the subject.
Oh, okay, it's from John Maxwell.
Yeah, the Ethics 101 book.
Okay,
That's and if you can contact some of the resources, a couple resources that you would refer people to. So Etta hasn't made a list of resources, like Tolan and Bridget were supposed to look up some resources that they would refer or give to the couple in our homework case study. So if you can think of any organization or place you would contact and try to send people to, if you could contact them personally to gain information on what they can do to help what people that we would come across.
Oh, okay.
Okay?